The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Yesterday, we had one of the most stunning primary election upsets, maybe in congressional history. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor was soundly defeated by a Tea Party-backed economics college professor named David Bratt from Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia. And Mr. Bratt criticized Eric Cantor for being soft on immigration, contended that he supported what critics are calling amnesty for immigrants who are in the country illegally. And this is just a fascinating defeat because on the one hand, we saw what rarely happens, Lewis, a true Republican leader lose not a general election, but a primary to an underfunded candidate. Typically, as we talk about all the time, the candidate with more money typically wins. So on many levels, this is just incredible.
It is. And the only thing I can think of here is just word of mouth. I think this is one of those situations in which a group of people were excited about this, told other people, and it just spread like a virus.
Well, Eric Cantor thought, based on an internal poll just a few days ago, that he was ahead by something like 34 points. Okay, 34 points. Ended up losing by more than 10 points. And one of his campaign staffers, I don't remember exactly who, I heard yesterday, said that it was actually Democratic meddling in this primary that caused Eric Cantor to actually be 45 points opposite the polling that his team had conducted. If we've learned something from the Mitt Romney campaign, which now has been reinforced by the Eric Cantor loss here, it's that those internal polls may not be particularly accurate. And as we step back from this, we have to consider so many different things. Number one, is this a victory for the Tea Party? Or is this just an indication that there is total chaos within the Republican Party? As funny and as compelling as this may be on so many levels, we have to remember that this represents a move to the right for the Republican Party, because this is a Tea Party-backed, Ayn Rand-loving candidate who has replaced someone who, albeit incredibly corrupt, was not the most extreme guy that could have been in that seat. So, Lewis, this is actually a really scary thing on many levels.
Right. How many surprises like this are we going to run into, coming up? I don't know. I mean, I thought the Tea Party was kind of on its way out, but maybe we don't know everything, David.
I know it's shocking to think that. David Bratt will now face off with another Randolph-Macon professor named Jack Trammell in the November election. Eric Cantor, a guy who embraced the Tea Party initially and now has been dealt a potentially a death blow to his political career by the Tea Party. I guess that old adage from Confucius, Lewis, live by the bagger, die by the bagger, seems to be accurate.
Could be, David. It could just be a regional thing, too. We are talking about an area with heavy Tea Party activity.
Remember Fox News so-called expert and doctor psychiatrist Keith Ablow? He's the guy who said that data rage and smartphones, not guns, were responsible for the Aurora, Colorado Batman movie theater shootings. He's the guy who said that, quote, speaking as a psychiatrist, Joe Biden may be suffering from dementia and may have been drunk during the debate in which he completely embarrassed vice presidential candidate Paul Ryan. He now says in the reporting, they were doing almost like live breaking news of the Oregon school shooting that happened yesterday. We didn't even get to that because we had to talk about the Las Vegas shooting. We had to talk about the Georgia courthouse shooting. We had no time yesterday to talk about the Oregon school shooting. In any case, as the news was breaking about that shooting, Keith Ablow comes on and he says that the real concern around this shooting is that of anti-gun nuts. How absurd is it? First of all, he was asked to speculate on the possible motivations for this shooting. How absurd is it to speculate on that as it is breaking news? What does Keith Ablow know about the motivations? But even more ridiculous to suggest that anti-gun nuttery is a factor here. Let's take a look at the video from, I believe this was early in the morning with Kimberly Guilfoyle on Fox News. Check it out.
be getting the idea that the first thing they should think about is mental health gone awry in this system we have that's so fractured that lets people slip through the cracks. But the anti-gun nuts, they will be out in force saying it's all the guns. I predict, again, that we'll find that yet another person who used a gun was compromised by one or more psychological or psychiatric illnesses that could have been detected, because that's how the odds stack up.
Listen, my dad is a psychiatrist. I grew up around psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, licensed social workers. Some of them were quite quirky, I must admit, Lewis. No one would ever think to go on television and make any claim even remotely close to this. And if we analyze the subject, what's nuttier when we talk about gun nuts and anti-gun nuts? What's nuttier? Not wanting so many guns around so that fewer people are killed, or suggesting that it is actually gun safety laws that are causing more problems? You tell me, Lewis. This is just yet more completely irresponsible commentary from so-called Dr. Keith Ablow.
An interesting use of language, David. Of course, we have been using the term gun nuts for a long time. And now Fox, who is very good at using language, comes along with the term anti-gun nuts. And so now I guess we have it on both sides.
Keith Ablow is a guy who needs to be off Fox News, because I understand that it's not really news, right? We know Fox News isn't really news. The term news is not a regulated term. You're allowed to call yourself news even if it's not actual news. But we've crossed the line into straight up irresponsibility. And it's just becoming a completely dangerous institution on Fox News, having Dr. Keith Ablow suggesting all of these absurd theories. He needs to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder who they would replace him with. It seems every expert they have on that channel is just completely insane.
Tomorrow, the World Cup starts in Brazil, the 2014 Soccer World Cup. And if the piles of garbage seemed high after Carnival, just wait and see what happens after the World Cup. Foreignpolicy.com has a really interesting article about how the people in Brazil are already, in spite of the fact that they are presumably should maybe have some kind of pride about hosting the World Cup, are actually pretty concerned about it. Those who can afford to do it are maybe getting out of the country altogether during the World Cup. We have others who are just trying to get as many supplies and food as possible as they can afford to basically just lock themselves down during the entirety of the World Cup. In Germany and South Africa, the local mood was very celebratory upon the opening of the World Cup. But Brazilians are taking a very different attitude, basically preparing for lockdown, as they are going to have this completely corporate invasion of their country. We often see that after Olympics and World Cups, the situation for the locals in these countries does not improve and very often gets even worse. And we have Rio in a particularly bad situation now in the midst of a crime wave. And there has been pretty widespread reporting, Lewis, about the situation on the ground there. We have police mortalities up 40% from last year. Police are walking off of their jobs altogether. Brazil in 2013 ranked 72nd out of 175 countries on the Corruption Perception Index, how corrupt the country is perceived to be. We really have a situation here where I am the soccer fan. I love the World Cup. I am hugely excited for it. But at the same time, it seems with every passing World Cup and Olympic season, we see that actually these events can be quite damaging to the local population, not the boon, the economic explosion and just celebratory party that many would want us to believe it is.
Right. Brazil is spending tons of money, even some money, millions of dollars on stadiums that will only be used for this World Cup. FIFA is paying no taxes in Brazil. So Brazil is getting nothing back. It's a very, very bad situation. And I have a friend down there. I'm very curious to hear all about it after the World Cup is over.
Yeah, no question. And I have a cousin right now who recently moved to Brazil, and I'm in touch with him, and I'm hoping to see what exactly goes on. I'm going to watch the World Cup. I mean, I love the World Cup, but I am feeling somewhat guilty. I just don't know. I don't know what the solution is. Just saying no more World Cup seems like a terrible solution, and I just don't know how guilty should I be feeling about the fact that I am going to watch.
I don't know, David. It seems like boycotting watching the games is going to have zero impact. So you might as well just watch the games and root for your team.
Well, if nobody watched the games, then that would certainly have an impact.
I don't think it would. I think things would continue, David. To even say that is the most ridiculous hypothetical of all time.
Yeah, I know. It's not feasible. It's not at all feasible. I understand what you're saying, and you're right that it's not going to be everybody. It would just be me not watching, and would that really do anything? Send me your thoughts on this. How are you feeling about the World Cup? Republicans have straight up tried to bribe a Democrat in order to block Obamacare. The Virginia Republican Party has resorted to outright bribery as it continues to try to deny low-income residents access to the Medicaid expansion that is, of course, part of the Affordable Care Act, as we've talked about for a long time. The Washington Post is reporting that Republicans made an offer to State Senator Philip Puckett and his daughter, where they would give them prestigious jobs if Puckett would resign. His resignation would then turn control of the state Senate over to Republicans, and that would allow them to block access to the Medicaid expansion. Now, Puckett initially accepted this offer on Monday. Then there was insane public outcry about the fact that, hey, this is just a bribe. What are you doing? And then he has now taken back the acceptance of that offer. This was a obvious quid pro quo bribe. And the problem I'm having with this is that I'm seeing more criticism of Republicans for offering the bribe than for the Democrat for accepting it. But this is equal blame, Lewis. Offering bribes and accepting them until there's public outcry to the point that you have to take it back, both are equally despicable activities that are part of the corrupt political system that we have.
It's all pretty bad, David, and perhaps the worst of all is take backsies. I mean, that is just so childish and terrible. The corruption is rampant. This is just a pathetic story.
Yeah, bribes wouldn't be offered if there weren't a climate where they might be accepted. So we have to place equal blame here. And I remind everybody that accepting bribes or planning to accept a bribe, agreeing to accept a bribe, even if you don't ultimately accept it, both are felonies in Virginia. Good luck proving that. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon.
Yeah, probably not. Basically because of more corruption.
Yeah, no question about it. Amazing. And I've gotten so many emails about this. And my obviously, if you think that this is okay, you're beyond help at this point. But if you don't, let's remember that whoever is offering the bribe and whoever is accepting the bribe are together. They are together in this thing, and both need to be held accountable. Let's take a break. We have a fascinating interview today. Frank Mink, the former neo-Nazi that we interviewed a month or two ago, is going to be back. And he has some incredible behind-the-scenes stories about corporate media telling him, do not talk about the connection between the anti-government shooting in Las Vegas and Tea Party right-wing Republican Cliven Bundy ideology. He's going to spill the beans on that. Stay with us. Excellent interview coming up.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is supported in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com refuses to have their theories, graphs, and charts dictated by liberal fact checkers. Find out how you too can free yourself from the oppression of liberal facts at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Carolina Case. Carolina Case, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. Carolina has access to the bonus show hosted by producer Lewis, where I am the sidekick. Yesterday's bonus show, people are absolutely up in arms. Supposedly, they've stopped writing to the FCC because they were just so fired up about yesterday's bonus show that they decided to just put the net neutrality stuff on hold for a second because of my story of almost being pulled into a street fight over the weekend in Austin, Texas. So sign up for membership, get the bonus show, hear what we are talking about. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. Today is Wednesday, and on Wednesdays, we have Hatriot Mail.
Hatriot Mail, your break from the tyranny of unbiased, independent media. Because knowledge and information are just communist conspiracies. Hatriot Mail, written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
All right, so since yesterday we had a resurgence of Alex Jones-related conspiracy theories, I thought we would use this Hatriot Mail today, which is conspiracy theory related. This is a specific one that we received. We still get countless emails in response to the debunking of Sandy Hook conspiracy theories that were in great part fueled by Alex Jones. So we're going to bring back, this is conspiracy theory Hatriot Mail. Listen to this. Someone really doesn't like the fact that we don't think Sandy Hook was a staged false flag event. Listen to this.
Sandy Hook hoax debunked? You are a young, naive boy. You require death and evil. It is a requirement of your opinion. You require that the children be dead. Without their death, you are nothing. That is personality disorder. It is frank, clinical, mental disorder.
Yeah. Putting aside the absurdity of the idea that the fact that I don't think it was a conspiracy makes me mentally ill, it actually dances around something really interesting, Lewis, which is that for a long time, we have theorized that one of the main reasons why there is this desire to believe in these conspiracy theories is that many people would be more calm, more tranquil, if they were to believe that there is no random senseless death, that it is all controlled and planned by someone. So as crazy as this Hatriot Mail is, they are kind of projecting the opposite of what we've seen in conspiracy theorists, which is the desire for logic and lack of chance in the creation of conspiracy theories.
Right. It's a fascinating glimpse into that psyche, if you will.
I've talked about how we have to be careful when we talk about LGBT rights, not to equate the struggle for LGBT rights with other struggles for equality, be it racial equality, be it gender equality, because every one of these struggles is different. But at the same time, I think in many cases it is pretty useful to draw parallels that exist between different struggles for equality and to look at the historical context. And we saw a great example of this in a hearing about so-called threats to religious freedom. Now, once you stop laughing about the fact that so-called threats to religious freedom are now the subject of congressional hearings, once you get beyond that absurdity, we can actually look specifically at New York Congressman Gerald Nadler, who grilled Matt Staver, who's an anti-gay zealot from the Liberty Council yesterday. And they started talking about this constant thing that now we're hearing about. Is it a violation of religious freedom to say you can't refuse service to someone on the basis of them being gay? So let's first talk about this first clip. I'll play the clip for you. Here, Congressman Nadler draws a parallel between refusing service to someone because they are gay with refusing or a gay couple to refusing service to someone because they are a black couple, and maybe that goes against your religion. Okay, let's start with that.
The gay marriage, is that correct?
Correct.
Would it be an equal limitation, his religious belief, if he said, I don't want to go to a wedding of black people? I want to discriminate against black people? Would that be would the government saying you can't do that be a violation of his religious freedom?
I think that's fundamentally different.
Why?
She's not saying she doesn't want to photograph a wedding where there's people who are gay and lesbian. She's saying she doesn't want to photograph a celebration of same-sex unions.
Well, and if her religious belief said, I don't want to celebrate a celebration of black unions because I think black people shouldn't get married. That's my religion. Should government? I mean, is it an imposition on her religious freedom for government to say you can't do that?
I think it's fundamentally different, and I don't think that's what the issue is in that case. And I don't
exactly what the issue is.
No,
Okay, so Matt Staver can't really explain why it would be different to not photograph black weddings and not photographing gay weddings. He just can't really come up with anything, okay? So then we continue here, and now Nadler suggests, well, what if it was a Jewish couple instead of a black couple? Let's explore that.
She has a religious belief that she shouldn't participate or be forced to participate in a celebration which goes against her religious belief. And let's assume her religious belief that she shouldn't photograph a Jewish wedding. Would that be discrimination that the civil rights law can proscribe or not? And if not, why not?
I think it would be something that she wouldn't object to, first of all. Secondly,
this is classic misdirection, right? It's like when that attorney, I think his name was John Yoo, was asked by Congressman Conyers, would the president have the legal authority to order someone be buried alive? And John Yoo replied, the president would never do that. This is the exact same type of misdirection, Lewis, where he says, well, I don't think anybody, no Christians, would refuse to photograph a Jewish wedding. Classic misdirection, non-answer.
Right. Textbook, David.
Okay, and then we go on to the third part, and then this is the maybe this is the last attempt to explain why, Matt Staver, why is it okay to discriminate against gay couples but not against black or Jewish or other types of couples that you might have a sincerely held religious objection to?
Somebody with some religious belief might object. I'm not saying that your client or your friend or whoever she is, let's assume that someone had such a religious belief, that it's a violation of her religious belief to be forced professionally, because she's a photographer, to photograph a Jewish wedding or a Muslim wedding or whatever.
Yeah, so this went on for a little while longer. Not a single reasonable point was made here. The most absurd thing is not that Matt Staver couldn't make a good point about why it's okay to discriminate against gay people. That's obvious. There is no good reason to discriminate against gay people. There are two interesting things here. Number one is that we're even having these hearings in the first place. The idea that we need a hearing in this country to figure out if Christians are being discriminated against because they can't discriminate against gay people, that at its face is absurd.
Right. The fact that this guy is here talking about this in front of the people that are questioning him, it just seems like a situation that shouldn't be happening.
No question. And then number two, the other interesting thing is that while you and I know that Matt Staver believes that there is biblical authority that supersedes the government or the state saying don't discriminate against gay people, he doesn't mention that in the congressional context, probably because even though he believes that absolute nuttery, he knows that it would be absurd to present that as the reason at a congressional hearing.
That would be my guess. But you put a guy like Rafael Cruz in there, and I'm sure he would very quickly say that those guys are all abominations and they're spitting in the face of God. Maybe.
I think even Ted Cruz's dad, Rafael Cruz, in a congressional hearing would have the common sense not to say that biblical law trumps, I don't know what you would call it, secular law, actual law. But very, very interesting. He could just come up with nothing at all. Okay, a Catholic archbishop claims he didn't know that he doesn't know when he figured out that sex with children was a crime, and he's not sure if he knew it 10 or 15 years ago. This is the St. Louis archbishop who's embroiled in a sexual abuse scandal. He testified last month that he didn't know in the 1980s whether it was illegal for priests to have sex with children, according to a court deposition that was released a couple of days ago. This is Archbishop Robert Carlson, and he was chancellor of the Archdiocese of Minneapolis. And at the time, he claims that at the time he just wasn't really sure whether priest sex with children was against the law. And the St. Paul law firm, Jeff Anderson and Associates, released some video from this deposition, and I'm going to play it for you here. The Catholic archbishop is asked whether he knew it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a child, and subsequently whether he knew it was a crime for a Catholic priest to engage in sex with a child. Let's take a look at his answers. Brace yourselves.
Archbishop, you knew it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a kid.
I'm not sure whether I knew it was a crime or not. I understand today it's a crime.
When did you first discern that it was a crime for an adult to engage in sex with a kid?
I don't remember.
When did you first discern that it was a crime for a priest to engage in sex with a kid who he had under his control?
I don't remember that either.
Isn't the only logical answer when you're asked, when did you first know that it was illegal for adults or Catholic priests to have sex with children? Isn't there one right answer? And it's, you know what? I don't remember because I've known this since I was a kid. That, in my mind, is the only logical answer here.
This guy's, and you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Alberto Gonzalez. The I don't recall remembering, I don't not recall not remembering.
Yeah.
He's kind of playing that game. Of course, it's a complete joke.
Carlson's role at the time of this scandal, when these acts allegedly took place, was to investigate claims of abuse. And he admitted in his deposition that he never once went to police, even when a clergy member had admitted to inappropriate behavior. And I guess, my guess would be that in some cases, when you claim ignorance to a law, when you claim you didn't know something was illegal, it can be a mitigating factor in sentencing or even in illegality, right? This with accounting fraud. In some cases, if you say, you know, I wasn't actually trying to hide anything, I just didn't really know what the law was, it can sometimes be a mitigating factor. My guess is he's just playing dumb here.
Yeah, he's got to be playing dumb, of course. There are few people on the planet who would have answers this stupid without making them up.
All right, let's take a break. Former neo-Nazi Frank Mink joins us next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Frank Mink, who is a former neo-Nazi and also the author of the book, The Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead. Frank, it's great to have you back again. We had some great feedback the last time you were on, and we're actually here to talk about, in the wake of really two over the weekend shootings that involved right-wing, extremist, anti-government, in some cases, this kind of white supremacist ideology, we've seen a reluctance from corporate media to be upfront about the connection between that ideology, the kind of Second Amendment gun fetishism, the Tea Party, the Clive and Bundy Ranch, and you actually know quite a bit about that connection that exists. So let's start kind of at the broadest level. What is the connection between the Tea Party and neo-Nazi ideology?
You know, the big connection happened right around where they started actively even recruiting some of the older neo-Nazis that I even know on the East Coast. Excuse me. Some of the guys that I even used to run with in the movement 20 years ago were starting to become members of the Tea Party. And then one guy ran for, I think, sheriff of his town or city councilman. You have to check it. His name was Steve Smith, and it was in Pennsylvania. Well, as he started to run for this office, he ran under the Tea Party flag, but he kept mentioning the Jews. So the Tea Party said, can you kind of chill out with some of the Jew rhetoric and we'll back you up here still.
So let's talk a little bit about the recruiting. You talked about guys that were involved in neo-Nazi groups with you 20 years ago have started to shift into the Tea Party movement. Has that, who recruited who or who sought out who?
I'm sure the skinhead guys and the neo-Nazis and the Christian, the Christian identity, Aryan Nation guys actively went into the Tea Party. Like they started seeing, and I started seeing it about 2-3 years ago, where I noticed like a lot of guys were reposting things on Twitter or Facebook, neo-Nazi guys, still active, but we're getting older and not so much putting swastikas out anymore on their Facebook because they were dads and their kids were in high school because they're my age. But I noticed they were always posting like Tea Party articles and stuff from their website. So I started looking into it. And then I started to notice that when some of them started to get more and more extreme and get more into the Christian conservative movement and bringing that more and more into the Tea Party, I noticed again the rhetoric was just there. But here's what I wanted to talk about with you, David, was that everyone always thinks when we used to talk about a race war that we meant black versus white. We've never meant, when I was in the movement, we never meant black versus white in a race war. The race war was white versus the federal government. That's Timothy McVeigh. That's where all that comes into play. And it's starting to really come up again.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Let's stop right there. So if we think about the kind of stereotype of neo-Nazi ideology, a lot of people, as you're saying, believe, you're correct in saying, that it means white versus specific other races, typically black or Hispanic. But what you're saying is that even dating back 20 years, when you were in the neo-Nazi movement, when there was a discussion of race war, it was white versus the government, who was what? Holding down the white man? Is that the idea?
Yeah, and that the government is secretly run by the Jews who are pandering to the blacks who are helping them get ahead of the white man. But it's never, I mean, I honestly, it's never been said the race war was going to be us versus South Chicago street gangs. It was always, we were going to get in the compounds and get our, whatever mountain we were going to hold up in, and we were going to fight the federal government.
So explain that, though, because there's no denying that there is anti-black and anti-Hispanic sentiment among these groups. So was that just kind of seen almost like as a secondary battle, or what? How did it fit in?
Yeah, well, in the neo-Nazi movements and the white supremacists, the separatist movements, the Jews are always top dog of hate. I mean,
right.
You don't get no higher than that. That's, the ultimate hate is towards the Jews. So that goes back towards the government. And when, we talked about the gathering up of arms, it's just pounded into us all the time, that the federal government is evil and that they are our worst enemy as the white man. And I mean, everything I watched that happened on that Bundy ranch and that's where me and you first kind of started talking, was about that incident. I mean, that just so reminded me of it. And then when I would watch, and this is where I called you this week because CNN was going to have me on.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I mean, this is people's minds are going to be blown by this.
So CNN, and I don't want to get too specific with what show and what producers. They call me because they always call me whenever bad stuff happens. They never call and say, "Hey, Frank, we, hear you're really doing great stuff with hockey." That's why my voice is gone. I've been yelling at kids for 5 days straight now coaching. But anyway, these guys call me and say, "We want you to come on and talk about the shooting this weekend." I said, "Absolutely. What would you like? How would you like to do this? How would you like to set it up?" They said, "Okay, well, let's do a pre-interview." And they started talking to me. And I told them about the federal government thing. I said, "Look, again, stop thinking that when we said race war, we mean black versus white. I mean, we always meant the federal government." That Timothy McVeigh and the order, and I'm going over the stuff. And they said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, what's the difference today?" And I said, "Well, what the difference is today is that we never had a national news network that stood by us that they have now." And of course, they didn't want me to go there. And I said,
so to be clear to everybody, what you're alluding to is that Fox News has been hugely supportive of the Tea Party. And that's what you were alluding to, right?
Because I started to give her even examples. I said, there was times when Kelly, the hottie chick Kelly on Fox News, I can't think of her last name, where I would watch, because I watch Fox News every day because I like to drive myself crazy. But I like to see how they're propaganding. So as I watched her talk about it, she says, there are American citizens right now being surrounded by federal government with AR-15s. And she goes on, and these ranchers, right? She keeps spinning. You know how they do it.
Yeah.
So they keep doing this. And I was watching it the whole time. Then Sean Hannity comes on, he starts saying the same thing. American citizens, farmers, ranchers are being surrounded right now by not giving a news story, but beating a drum.
Certainly editorializing. But so what I want to focus in on is the CNN producer said, Frank, don't mention Fox News. Don't mention the connection to the Tea Party, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry I got off. So yes, she says they call me back because I do the pre-interview. She doesn't say it to me right away. She calls me back and says, hey, we really love the stuff you were saying about the federal government and the white racist movements wanting to fight them. And she said, but can you not bring up Fox News or the GOP stuff, is what she said. Fox News or GOP stuff. And I said, well, it's true. And she said, well, that's, can you just, if you come on, can you not do that? And I was like, okay.
Right. And ultimately they didn't have you on. But the fascinating thing is, we were speculating over the last couple of days that corporate media wants to do everything they can to ignore this obvious connection that is existing, this trend of right-wing domestic terrorism, the connection to the Tea Party, the connection to this anti-government ideology. And now what you're saying is CNN specifically told you to ignore that connection that exists.
I mean, word for word, what I just said is what she told me.
Yeah.
She told me not to bring it up. And that is what is so, I mean, look, I'm not a fear-mongering person. I don't want people to be fearful of all conservatives and conservative groups. I just don't. I mean, but I'm telling you that right now, there is a movement in that movement that is going to be coming out that is going to keep going more and more violent.
Yeah.
This is not going to stop. Look, we have never, in the whole history of this planet Earth that we live on, we have never been able to separate from each other peacefully. And these people want to separate. And of course, they say to the news outlets and they say to people, we want to separate, but we want to do it peacefully. No, they don't. If you are a gun nut, and I shouldn't call them names, but if you are a gun nut and that's all you think about is shooting your gun, you're not thinking peacefully resolution here.
No, certainly if you're thinking of a Second Amendment solution, that is not a peaceful solution by its definition. No. Frank, I know we have so much more to talk about, but we are out of time and we wanted to squeeze you in. I want to make sure everybody knows about the book, The Autobiography of a Recovering Skinhead. We've been speaking with Frank Mink. And Frank, it's always great to have you on. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks. Thank you. Sorry about my voice.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This is pretty funny. You know how we often talk about how the desired policies of many right-wing religious rightists are pretty similar when it comes to issues of gender rights, gay rights, education, control of children. They're very often similar to what we see in Sharia law-based Middle Eastern countries. Now, of course, these same religious rightists who want very similar, like a Christian version of that Sharia law in the US, would never really praise any of those countries, in spite of the fact that a lot of their desires in terms of the law are pretty similar. We now have an exception to that. This is a Republican state legislator who is not happy that an Arkansas judge ruled that the state's same-sex marriage ban is not okay, struck it down. He went on a conservative radio show and said, actually, it might be good if politicians in this country emulated those from Saudi Arabia by basing laws off of Christian doctrine, as Saudi Arabia does with Islam. This is State Senator Jason Rapert, who appeared on the Dave Ellswick show last week. And what he said, I'm just going to read you his quote, okay? He said, "When judges assert the will of the people wholly in this country, they are pulling the rug out from underneath representative democracy. By the way, Saudi Arabia, they don't live under the same kind of law that we do. They live under the law that they see fit to live under there. We have that right here too, and that's why there's such an injustice here." Saudi Arabia, of course, is a country where women can't drive or play sports in school. They have to get permission from a male relative before they can leave the country. They need to get permission from a male relative to open a bank account or start a job. And yes, State Senator Jason Rapert says it's an injustice that we can't emulate the religious bigotry of Saudi Arabia here in the U.S. in a Christian flavor of that Sharia law, we've now seen it all, Lewis. Not just suggesting similar laws, but actually saying we should look at what Saudi Arabia is doing.
Right. And of course, they think that their version of their country would be different, better, superior to what's happening in Saudi Arabia. I think it would be indistinguishable, David. The only difference is that over there they'd have shawarma and over here we'd have fried chicken. I think other than that, they'd pretty much be the same.
It would be identical. It would be it would be the same thing, yet under another name. And it's as simple as that. A woman in Jinjiang City, China, dropped her cell phone into an open pit toilet, okay? The woman's husband decided to climb down into the open pit toilet to collect her phone, and he reportedly lost consciousness while he was in the cesspit. Then that man's mother decided to jump in and try to save her son, but then she fainted, and a doctor that was interviewed by a local paper said that the people, both of them, suffocated due to lack of oxygen in the cesspit's air, and that the gases from the sewage displaced oxygen, which led to asphyxiation. Neighbors used a rope to try to haul the people out. In total, 6 people ended up being pulled from the cesspool, which was reportedly filled with knee-deep waste, all over this phone that was dropped in there. I don't really know what to be more upset about here, Lewis. It is, of course, incredibly sad that people are desperate to jump into an open pit toilet to rescue a $300 phone. But it's also worth exploring that people who own $300 phones also have places where the plumbing is a waste cesspit.
Right. It's a fascinating story. I mean, you would think that if they can afford a $300 phone, they wouldn't need to jump into a toilet to go after it. But then again, I don't know, perhaps it's one of those precious commodities that you invest a lot in and take pride in having. I'm not sure.
Well, I got an email about that, and someone wrote to me who lives in China and said $300 could be around 2 months' salary, not even savings, but 2 months' salary. Given the cultural lack of germophobia and the cost of the phone, I could see why someone might jump into the pit, not caring about the human waste and caring about the phone. Materialism is also a status symbol there. Luxury items are like college degrees here. They might not be worth the investment on paper, but the social investment is worth it. Just a horrible story. I mean, I don't even know what else we can say about it, but just absolutely disheartening and sad that this is the situation in parts of the world. Let's go to your voicemails. Our voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Let's take a listen to one voicemail, see what they have to say.
Hey, David, it's Derek. I was just wondering why it is that these gun crazy people can walk into a Sonic with full assault rifles and no one is protesting. Everyone's just kind of uncomfortable. But you have these young minority kids walking around in, say, like a big city, or hey, even Trayvon Martin walking around with iced tea and Skittles and gets murdered. But these idiots can walk into a Sonic with full-on assault rifles and no one cares. Does anybody else see anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I noticed this as well. We didn't really talk about it, but in the Sonic video, not everybody's flipping out about the fact that there's these guys walking around with these assault rifles strapped to their backs. There should be more people who are like, whoa, 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 I don't want to be here if these guys with the assault rifles are walking around. It's a absolutely excellent point. It's not really being discussed too much. On today's bonus show, Lewis will talk to us about Slender Man. We will also hear about Vladimir Putin wanting to bring back Stalingrad and much more, including Hillary Clinton's dead broke comment. DavidPakman.com/membership is how you sign up for the bonus show, and you get all of the other member benefits, including the commercial-free podcast, audio and video of the bonus show, the archive dating back to 2005. Sign up today, and we'll talk to you on today's bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.